what group of people bring most of the heart attack victims to hospitals? Firefighters. Secondly, if the firefighters show up here and get known as the firefighter hospital, don't you think that would be helpful? So we convinced the hospital to give us the scans for free. So we can, Brenda and I can talk to you later about this, but there's ways to make the system work so that firefighters don't have to pay much of anything. So we then moved to Monterey and Carmel, and Chief Panholzer is the chief there, Spencer Reed's sort of their head of health and wellness. And they helped us do the study through our clinic called Prima Heart down there. And then we did Seaside, moving on to Salinas and stuff. So this is all done through a nonprofit. And that's one suspicion firefighters have sometimes is, oh, you want to do a test just because you want to make money. And I think that's a valid concern, actually. However, if you get people to do it for free, then the argument doesn't exist anymore. So here's what we did. It was a voluntary program, and the data went back to the individual firefighter. It did not go to the fire chief. It did not go to the insurance company. It just went to that person, and they could do with it as they wanted. And we would debrief them on it. We measured all these things you see here, a whole bunch of fancy things. The fish oil test, the omega-3 is a test of how much fish oil is in your blood, and that was abysmally low. And so Brenda then went around to all the firehouses and taught them how to cook salmon. So we think that's getting better, but that's an easy fix. The phlebotomy fee was discounted, and the CT scans we got discounted. So in Monterey, it eventually ended up costing them $25 or something. So here's the comparison of Monterey and Georgia. And at the very bottom is the percent with disease. And at first pass, you say, wow, the Monterey firefighters have less heart disease. They must be in better shape. But if you look at the top, there's an age difference. And when you normalize it for age, it's 30%. So in every city we've looked at, Phoenix, Monterey, Seaside, Atlanta, it's always about 30% of the firefighters have evidence of coronary disease. And that's just Seaside versus Monterey. So getting close to the ending here, what can you do about this? How can you help this? Well, can a lifestyle modification program be beneficial here? So this is what we're going to present at the American College of Cardiology in a few weeks. So we got together with Boston, the Boston Heart Diagnostics, and said there's a program out of Phoenix called Heart Fit for Duty, and also firefighters and police in Boston. And let's measure things and pick out the guys at risk, i.e. they're overweight or they have low HDL cholesterol. And we're going to give them a lifestyle intervention program by telephone. So they sign up, and the first thing they do is they have a 50-minute telephone interview. What do you eat? That kind of stuff. What kind of exercise do you like? Then we're going to call you up by telephone weekly and encourage you to do that, do a follow-up on you. Then we're going to do it every 2 months. Then we're going to do it bi-monthly, play all kinds of games and things. And does this work? So looking over on the right is the delta or change at 3 months, 6 months, and 12 months. And if you draw your eye down there, you can see a highly significant improvement in measures of the metabolic syndrome and thrombogenic issues by a lifestyle modification program that is extraordinarily inexpensive. And it went out for 12 months. So very often these lifestyle things go to 3 months, and then you say, well, what happened at 6 months? And they kind of petered away. But this program had a longevity thing built into it, so that they would contact firefighters by phone over an entire 12-month period. So the point is, it can be done, and it can be done inexpensively. So your community can do this. The treatment is inexpensive. The test results guide the treatment. So I want to give you an example of one thing that I think is really cool that happened to one of our firefighters, and it shows you how these sophisticated tests help. Your blood cholesterol is the result of 2 different ways you get cholesterol. One is you absorb it from the intestine, and that's what you eat and some genetic things. The second way is what you make in your liver. So you make it in your liver, or you absorb it in your intestine. So you can measure things in your blood that tell you, is your blood cholesterol level coming mainly from your intestines or mainly from your liver? If it's from your liver, then the statin drugs work great. If it's coming from your intestines, it's different. So this is one of our firefighters, 46 years old, comes in May. His LDL cholesterol is 163. He's on a statin drug called simvastatin. And most of the time, a physician would say, okay, that's too high. I'm going to give you more simvastatin. We'll go to 40 milligrams, maybe 80 milligrams. We'll just keep cranking that sucker up because we've got to get your cholesterol down. In the lower right-hand corner is that cholesterol production and absorption test. And those red bars on the right tell you that this guy's cholesterol is coming primarily from absorption. Statins don't do much for absorption. So in July of 2016, we put him on a drug called ezetimibe, which is a drug specifically designed to help prevent absorption. And his LDL cholesterol went from 160 to 24. So, and we see this all the time in the clinic. So this is what a sophisticated test can help you do, not just risk classification, but what kind of therapy should you be on for that individual, not for the entire population, but for that individual. So firefighters have more CAD, it's more severe, at the highest risk while they're doing an event which protects us, so I don't want you guys to go down while you're coming to my house. We can identify the vulnerable firefighter. The cause of heart disease can be identified, treatments exist, your community can do this. What do you need in your community? And Brenda and I are always happy to talk to people, but number one, you need interest from you, the first responders. So the force itself and the chief has to say, yeah, this is something we're going to get behind. You need a committed local team, like a physician, nurse, people involved in the fire department who are willing to work for free. They do a lot of design. Brenda just worked her butt off on all these things. I kind of sat back and took it easy. But there's lots of contacting and phone calling and debriefing and stuff. You need to find a laboratory that's willing to help. And when we did our Monterey Carmel, we went to Boston Heart Diagnostics, and they contributed what's worth $470,000 with blood tests. I am not saying they're going to give away free tests to everybody, but they now have a program of reduced fees for firefighter programs. So you get the laboratory involved, you get the hospital involved, get grants from the hospital foundation, which Brenda did. The firefighter union in Monterey helped out a little bit, and you need lots of energy and commitment. So it's not trivial, but you can do it, and it's a lot of fun, and we were greatly rewarded by the Monterey. We were tremendously rewarded because we got to ride in the lead fire truck in the 4th of July parade. So we'd like to thank firefighters all over the U.S. and internationally as well. And we will have a Q&A session at some point, I guess. Is that the plan? How's my timing?
You have 10 minutes.
I think
I got 10 minutes.
I think we are ahead on time, so you want to take 5 minutes questions, and then we'll do the panel in 5 minutes. Any questions for Dr. Saperko?
Just real fast, is any of this looking at actual duty positions? When we say firefighters, we're not always talking about those who physically go in and fight fire. Just from what I've been able to pull, and I know I'm just a guy who's around on the internet, and the reports that I get, it seems like the majority of heart attacks that we have are our engineers and our ACs and BCs, which are those who drive around telling everybody what to do. Now, subsequently, they also have different requirements by NFPA as far as their physicals. So it's kind of that thing where if you're not going to be put on the line to actually have to haul somebody out, it seems like those are the people that I have problems with gaining weight and that.
Yeah.
So
what I can say about that is in the Georgia study, it was active duty firefighters who were on the line. It probably included some engineers, but by and large it was guys that went into the fire. In Monterey, it did not include staff or people sitting around the office, but I'm sure there were some engineers in that group as well. Brendan, do you have?
Well, one other thing I'll say is, don't you think that the engineers are getting older?
it all depends on, yeah, it depends.
No, we took all comers in our community screenings.
But not the people sitting in a chair in the office all day long.
Right, well, and I also was covering the assistant chiefs and the battalion chiefs who go out and.
Yeah, they
They're
were
not
included.
firefighters.
Yeah, the chief was included.
Okay.
But I think basically, to bring back to what we discovered was that by calcium imaging, a third of firefighters that did not know they had coronary disease discovered they had heart disease. Now take those firefighters and put them in a vulnerable situation of fire and let them, their blood become thicker, the hypovolemia, the clotting. They're the ones that will have the incidences that will go into the statistics that you're probably Googling and looking around.
I guess my point was, NFPA gives us lower standards for those personnel, yet in my mind, at least from what I've been able to find, those are the ones where we're having the majority of the heart attacks. So it's like, shouldn't everybody, because there is physical stress, even though you're not pulling hose, shouldn't everybody, I guess that's my point, is I'm looking at, shouldn't NFPA look at that and say everybody that goes out on a fire should have those things?
For the community, for the community studies, that's exactly what we do. We do everybody that wants to participate, so there are no limitations. Let me ask you to go on to our nonprofit website, which is www.familyheartfoundation.org, and you'll see a video of one of our firefighters in Atlanta, who is a ultra-marathon triathlete, great-looking guy, you know, he's won all these awards and everything. We did our test, he had triple vessel disease. And so he's interviewed, and he talks about he raised 2 daughters because his wife died early, and it's a real tearjerker. But this guy was one of those guys that would have gone bonk. But he's still working I guess he's an engineer now because he takes care of the equipment and that kind of stuff. So I think that firefighters should not be afraid that if you find something wrong, you're going to lose your job. The idea is you find something wrong and then you correct it. Yes?
Well, hi. First of all, really nice presentation. I really enjoyed the
Thank you.
presentation.
Relax from UC Davis.
Kaiser.
Oh, you switched, sorry.
This is UC Davis. What is the role of the actual fire itself, the particulate matter, and play into like inflammation and kind of that baseline risk?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I can't answer it. Because when you do a study like this, you cannot go to the Human Use Committee and say, I'm going to expose these guys to some noxious chemicals and measure their blood before and after. You can't do a human study like that. You can't expose people to harm intentionally. However, there's a rich literature on how those things indeed can be contributing not only to heart disease but cancer. But I can't answer your question specifically. It plays a really major role, however. Yes.
Could you talk about, if you know the statistics, the LA County firefighters program that is saving, I think it's $1 million a year for 10 years now through this preventive approach?
Yeah, well, perhaps I know a little bit about that with Matt. Do you want to talk about it, though? You probably might
Well,
have
I
more.
think it's just important for people to know that it's not only really important information for saving your fellow firefighters, but through the knowledge of what the coronary calcium score is, the medications and therapies and lifestyle modifications prevent the events, which are very, very expensive. So it actually saves the...
There's a cost-effectiveness calculation and argument you can make. And the guys in LA have done a really good job. They're the ones who did that slide on the severity of disease in firefighters. And you can sort of play that card locally, I think, if you want to get some money from the local politicians. I think that's the point.
Well, what the imaging does is it takes you from not having cardiovascular disease, you do have, then bingo, you do have atherosclerosis, you have calcium in the coronaries. So now you qualify for your statin drugs. Now you fall into that bucket where you're going to get more aggressively treated. Now you need a baby aspirin. Now we might do some of these more sophisticated tests and see where your cholesterol is coming from. So going from a 0 to knowing that you have calcium changes your physicians, your providers take on you and how aggressive they're going to be with you and the medications you get. So I think to Hattie's point is the AHA, the ACC risk calculator doesn't take into account, let's say, family history.
Let me ask the firefighters, do you have a hydration protocol when you're actually actively fighting fires?
No, sir.
So this is a recommendation that came out from our study and the Minnesota study, is that one possibility is to say, okay, for every X number of minutes in a fire, you drink X amount of water. And you come out and you, not Gatorade, not energy drinks, water. And so that's an easy way to do it. What they did in Minnesota was they actually had a scale. And they'd go in and they'd weigh, go in, come back out, stand, and they could say, okay, you need X number of liters of water. But any kind of way to maintain adequate hydration, I think, could go a long way during that activity.
That does take place, sir, when we do hazardous materials level 8 entry. You'll do a dry weight and a wet weight on a scale, and they'll basically check your hydration level once you're actually entering the IDLH in that full encapsulated gear and coming out. But it doesn't happen on structural or fires.
Do you have a rough idea how much weight is lost?
About 6 pounds.
Yeah, and that's obviously water.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yes.
For training purposes, like the academy, we have work rest, hydration, intervals or protocol that we follow. Just even if you take the fire element out of it, just the metabolic heat stress of your own body heat trapped against you in that turnout gear, you know, we recognize the, you know, the physiological effect, the weight loss, the water loss, and that we do have protocol we follow at the academy and for training with work, rest, hydration.
Good,
That's right. Something I just want to throw in there is, I can't emphasize enough, I'm actually a survivor of the exact same situation you're talking about. That's how I got to know Dr. Sky. A year ago, I had a pretty massive MI. Ejection fraction rate went down to like 35%. And here's the irony of this. 9 months before I had it, I went in for just a small procedure. Once again, I'm not a doctor. You guys all know the normal procedure is they go in, anesthesiologist, they ask you what drugs you're on, they take your blood pressure, they do an EKG. There was I call it a blip, I won't get into the medical terminology, but next thing you know, I've got the doctor and I got the anesthesiologist coming in going, hey, usually you military guys are pretty good about not lying to us, what are you not telling us? And I looked at him and I said,
Make sure we get this on the video.
Okay.
Yeah.
so I looked at the doctor and I got kind of got his face, I'm like, what are you saying, doc? He goes, and they call it an infarct, a minor depression in the EKG. And I said, I looked at him, I said, I think I would know if I'd had a heart attack. And he says, look, we'll do this procedure, but after this, we're gonna send you for a full cardiac workup. So within 35 days of just a small procedure, I went in for exactly what you said. I had the full stress test, the dye, and like the part of me, the military guy, I was running 4 days a week. And I would say my diet was not wonderful, but I also wasn't eating chicken wings 5 times a week either, right? And I was running, I felt good, I was in shape. And, and obviously you wait, when they said, we'll get back to you with your results. I'm a nervous wreck, they're gonna tell me you got a faulty valve or something, major serious. And when that phone call came back, I got was, you're good to go, you're healthy as a horse. You smoked the treadmill test, you're okay. 9 months later, I'm laid out and I'm at Travis Hospital, with Dr. Sky trying to figure out what's going on. And none of those indicators, and once I actually had later, after the heart attack, and I got the comprehensive lipid screening done, my indicators were screaming like blood red, that all these indicators were there, that normally when I go in and just see my primary care physician, they're just like, well, your cholesterol's a little high, we're gonna put you on a Lipitor or something. I don't know if I'm allowed to say drug names, but, but all these things that when I got the book back from Boston Heart, and they're breaking it all down, now it narrowed it down. I know where my weak spots are now with sugars and carbs and all these things that altered and changed my diet. The funny part is, I know like as far as insurance goes, you ask somebody who survived a heart attack, and I will tell you, I paid for that test out of my pocket almost. If 5 years ago I could have known I had all these indicators, and then the other part, and I'll finish up, I won't talk too much here, but is something Dr. Sky brought up is very true. We're very cautious when I go in and see a doctor. Now, I'm not a pilot, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade with these guys that work as a fire marshal, but anytime I go into a doctor, it's like your profession. I consider certain professions, they're callings, they're not just jobs to us. You have a calling to be a physician, a firefighter, in the military, we serve our country. So when I go in there, I'm very careful what I say, because pick something, there's this whole litany of things. If I go in there and say, well, I feel like I have asthma, if I get the wrong doctor, and Joe will laugh about this, I'm like, I'm not gonna say that, because that's a disqualifier, and they're gonna push me out of the military. Well, if I'm at 16 years of service, I'm not gonna get kicked out. So here's the value in the advanced lipid screening to me, as somebody who survived a heart attack. To me, it's a non-threatening test, and what I mean by that is, it just shows you how you can improve. There's nothing in the system that's gonna say, well, you popped positive on these certain indicators, therefore, that's it, your career's over. It's a tool we can use in our training to be able to say, hey, you're starting to show some stuff. We need to change your diet, we need to make you lose whatever those follow-on effects are. That is, I can't emphasize the great value of that it's not a discriminator to say, hey, you can't do this job anymore, but In some, I shouldn't completely say that, in some cases, it might identify somebody who has a serious condition, but I would, if somebody had told me this 10 years ago, I could have changed my dietary habits, all these things, and maybe I wouldn't have had that heart attack.
Yeah.
So there's value in it anyway, so thank you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
I
thank you.
appreciate it.
That's exactly what I was trying to say. And we don't want anybody to lose their job. And in fact, the case on our website that I mentioned had triple vessel disease, had bypass surgery, and he's back working in the fire department. You know, he's an engineer, so.
Actually, he retired, but he,
Well,
it was,
okay.
but the thing is, when we saw the firefighters, they retire a lot earlier typically. And so he had given his time and now he's hiking the Pacific Coast Trail.
So you had two big risk factors that I saw. One was hypovolemia and the other was prothrombotic blood test. For the hypovolemia, has any fire departments put like a hydration pack on these individuals because they've got oxygen and protection and everything? You're running around at a fire, you don't have time to go look for a drink or
I mean, like a
take
camel or
hydration.
something, one of the.
A camelback, so a
I don't
lot
know.
of hikers will go on the trail and and so you could put a little sipper in there that you could be, while you're doing your procedures, not have to go look for water, but just sip on a straw at that time, because the 6 pounds of weight you lose during a regular fire, you don't have time to go and drink 6 glasses of water. But if you had a hydration pack, that would work. And for the prothrombotic, has anyone looked at putting some individuals, let's say, on an aspirin or antiplatelet, or is the risk of trauma and bleeding outweigh that risk of prothrombotic events at that time?
I can't answer that last question, except clinically, that's what we recommend, because it's pretty simple. The hydration thing, do any of you guys use camel packs or anything like that? Or?
Just for a while then.
So from the NFPA standpoint of structural firefighting, the plastics that holds the water in there would off-gas provide a toxin.
Oh, lovely.
Also.
Just the exposure alone to the, all the
Heat
smoke and
and stress.
carcinogens and
Yeah.
heat, it makes it impractical for them to be consuming. Plus, if they're in there, they're usually on air. Yeah, they're breathing compressed air out of a self-contained cylinder, which, when you compress air itself, it removes moisture.
Dries it out.
So you get the double dehydration impact.
The other thing Dr. Ballmer brought up is hypovolemia, it's the clotting, but it's also the insulin resistance and the metabolic syndrome, which sets them up. And also, when we looked at firefighters and we saw that their omega-3, their fatty acid index, so that's a high-quality fish oil tablet that you could take. That also lowers blood viscosity and also can increase bleeding times a little bit. So it helps with that. So that thus was the reason why we were trying to teach firefighters to eat more salmon and less hamburger meat. So knowing your omega-3 level, I think is important. It's very individualized.
So with tracking macros and I don't eat fish, that's why I'm asking, but tracking macros and supplementing with fish oil, omega-3 vitamins, would that help versus?
That's one of our recommendations to all the community firefighters that we're in now.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it. We're going to start the panel now, so if I can have the panel members come up and have a seat at the front. That is Chiefs Holmes, White House, Dr. Rossiter, Superco, and Eve Weber as well. We're going to just discuss where we go from here. Got enough seats. All right, thank you very much for sticking around for the panel. We heard a lot of things in Dr. Sipurko's talk about the need for getting information about individuals, whether it's people over 40 or under 40 or everyone. Personal and family history, lifestyle is important. Habits and exercise are critical in trying to avoid metabolic syndrome. The measurements that were obtained in the Atlanta study included blood pressure, ankle arm index, which is pretty easy to obtain, waist hip measurements, some laboratory tests, lipid panel, glucose, insulin, CRP, and imaging. And imaging was in a number of studies, coronary CT calcium has come out as a high end. Valentin Fuster has some other looks at vascular plaques and carotids and other areas. We do have therapies for some of these things. We talked about possibly aspirin, diet, exercise, reduction in adverse habits, and medications that can lower LDL, relative risk reduction, and some absolute risk reduction as well for that. But we're here today to say for the firefighters in Sacramento that we're looking at, we do know, and Dr. Sipurko elegantly showed, that firefighters carry a risk, whether it's a twofold risk in some of the trials, or whether fire suppression is a 10 or 100-fold risk. Everyone agrees it's elevated, that we can see from all the scientific information. So I'd like the panel, if we could go through, to address 6 questions here. One is, are firefighters aware that their risk is elevated? And 2, are the firefighters, unions, employers, and others concerned about the risk of reducing an event? Or is there concern that if we are determined to have, let's say, a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, coronary calcium, it could change our job status, as we saw before. That is inapparent or inadvertent risk of losing your job status, even if it took 2 months or 3 months or 6 months to straighten it out. You might not be on active duty or active assignment for that period of time. And some people could feel, I've got my family, everything else to take care of. I don't want to go into a program to find out that I could possibly get reassigned or lose my job. Are there current exercise screening programs adequate for the firefighters? Are there gaps that we can address today for that? And lastly, is there funding or support that we could in fact look at to provide these services and bring in the major players and stockholders and stakeholders for this? So if we could start, let's say, from left to right, because I know Eve has to run to a fire, so if we could start from left to right and go across, address any or all of those questions that you would like to address.
Hi, my name's Eve Weber, and I'm the fitness coach for Sacramento Fire Department. Can you guys all hear me okay?
I don't think the mic is on.
Nope. I'm the fitness coach for Sacramento Fire Department, and I unfortunately do have to leave in a few minutes, but I wanted to address the questions that I can answer. From my perspective, I'm a part of our safety committee as well. We meet quarterly. We also have a risk management team that covers actually a lot of those answers. We have been focusing a lot on cancer screenings, and we do talk about cardiovascular issues. Our firefighters are aware. We do have a lot of information out there for them. That's also part of my job, is to educate them when they're in the academy and visiting the stations. So I make sure that I keep myself out there and continue to provide them the most current information we have. With that being said, the safety committee, we do have a flyer, if you will, that we hand out to all of our firefighters that shows blood panels that they can have done by their own doctor. That is not necessarily something that is provided through the department. We do have screenings that we offer every year. And it just changes depending on the funding that we have. So risk is, loss prevention is very, very supportive of that financially, as well as medically.